The twin suns of Damaris 9 bled light across the sand, turning the horizon into a molten sea of gold and rust. Each shimmered above the dunes like a fever dream, and the wind carried the dry taste of iron and decay. The colony outpost ahead looked half dead, metal structures slumped under years of dust storms, and neon signs flickered weakly in the haze. Lyra walked slowly through it all, clutching a bundle close to her chest. Her cloak whipped against her legs, frayed and stained by travel, but she didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the faint heartbeat against her ribs, the fragile rhythm of her daughter still alive. The baby stirred, making a soft, tired sound. Lyra looked down, her violet eyes softening for a moment. "Almost there, Wren," she whispered. Her voice was low and musical, but cracked from exhaustion. "Just a little longer." The wind tore the words away. She had been walking for days, no weeks. It was hard to tell anymore. The desert between colonies stretched endlessly, and every settlement she reached turned her away. Xina, they called her, enemy, alien, monster. Even now, long after the war had ended, the humans had not forgotten. The Dominion had won, but they never forgave. And Lyra, once a respected engineer in the Xina fleet, was now a ghost clinging to life in a human world that despised her. Outpost 47 rose from the sand like a broken bone, a place for smugglers, mechanics, and those who had nowhere else to go. Its air smelled of oil, smoke, and desperation. Lyra pulled her hood lower over her face and stepped into the main street, where merchants shouted over one another, trying to sell scraps of old tech and stolen rations. Her heart sank as her gaze drifted over the signs. No off-worlders. Humans only. Work permits required. She had no permit, no identification, no homeworld to return to. All she had was the child and the fading hope that someone, anyone, might look past her blue skin long enough to let her work. Her stomach twisted painfully as she passed a food stall. The scent of frying grain hit her like a punch, and for a moment she stopped, staring at the sizzling pan. The vendor, a heavy-set man with sunburned skin, caught her look and sneered. "Keep walking, alien," he muttered. "We don't serve your kind here." Lyra said nothing. She had learned long ago that pride didn't feed her daughter. She turned away, adjusting her grip on the baby. The child whimpered, a dry, pitiful sound, and Lyra's chest ached. Wren hadn't cried properly in days. That terrified her more than anything. She wandered past crumbling buildings, her boots sinking in the sand. Then, as if by fate, she noticed a flickering sign half buried in dust. Jalen's Mechanical Repairs, all models, all systems, a mechanic's shop. She hesitated outside the doorway, listening to the hum of machinery inside. Through the cracked glass, she saw a figure hunched over a workbench, sparks flashing from a welding tool. For a long time, she simply stood there, frozen. She had been turned away so many times, insulted, spat at, chased off with guns. What would one more rejection matter? But her daughter stirred again, her tiny fingers clutching at the cloth around Lyra's chest, and that gave her the courage to step inside. The air was thick with heat and oil. Tools were scattered across the tables, and the walls were lined with spare parts, motors, plasma conduits, and fuel cells stacked like bones. The man at the bench didn't look up. "We're closed," he said without turning around. Lyra's voice trembled, though she fought to steady it. "I saw your sign. You need workers?" He didn't stop working. "Don't take aliens, not after what happened last time. I can fix engines," she said quickly. "Power converters, old Dominion crafts, anything." That made him pause. He straightened and turned, lifting the welding mask from his face. The man had dark hair streaked with grey and sharp eyes the color of smoke. He looked her over, first her worn clothes, then the faint blue tint of her skin, and finally the small bundle in her arms. His jaw tightened. "You're Xina." "Yes," she admitted quietly. "But I'm not with them anymore." "That's what they all say." Lyra's fingers clenched on the edge of her cloak. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't want trouble. I just want to work. I'll clean, repair, anything. I'll take food instead of pay." He crossed his arms, expression unreadable. "You got a kid?" She hesitated before answering. Yes, my daughter. He glanced toward the bundle, then away, muttering something under his breath. This isn't a place for a kid. You should have stayed with your own kind. They're all dead, she said, too softly for him to respond. For a while there was only the hum of machinery. Then, without a word, he set down his tools and walked past her, gesturing toward the back of the shop. Storage room's empty. Cart's old, but better than the sand. If you're still here in the morning, I'll see what you can do. Lyra blinked, unable to move. You're letting me stay? He shrugged. You look like hell. And that kid's half-starved. Don't make me regret it. She followed him to the back room. It was small and cold, the floor covered in dust, and the air thick with the scent of oil, but to her it felt like paradise. She laid the baby gently on the cot, brushing sand from her cheeks. Wren's tiny hand reached up weakly, touching Lyra's chin before her eyes fluttered closed. For the first time in days, Lyra felt a single tear slip down her cheek. When she returned to the main room, the man, Jalen, was already back at his work. I'll earn my stay, she said quietly. He didn't look up. We'll see. You know your way around a Type 4 engine? I built them, she replied. That made him pause again. Without a word, he pushed a small fusion converter toward her. Fix it. Her hands moved automatically. Despite the fatigue in her limbs, muscle memory took over. She stripped the casing, rerouted the power channels, and soldered the fractured wire with precision only years of engineering could teach. The hum of life returned to the device, and the faint blue glow filled the room. Jalen watched her silently, his brow furrowing, not with suspicion, but curiosity. Didn't think you'd actually manage that, he said finally. Lyra allowed herself the faintest smile. I told you I can fix things. Guess you weren't lying. He picked up the converter, studying the seamless repair. You start tomorrow. We'll figure out pay later. Thank you, she whispered. He grunted in response, turning back to his work. Don't thank me yet. Lyra lingered for a moment, studying the man's face in the flickering light. He looked human enough, rough, scarred, tired, but there was something in his eyes that didn't quite match the rest of him. A guardedness, maybe, or guilt. She couldn't tell. When she finally turned to leave, her gaze caught on a holographic screen on his desk. It flickered briefly, displaying data she couldn't fully see, but then her breath caught. Her name was there, glowing faintly in red letters. Lyra, former Zynar officer, wanted. She looked away before he could notice her staring, heart pounding in her chest, as she slipped into the storage room and curled beside her sleeping child. Lyra closed her eyes and tried to believe that she had found safety, even for a night. But as the workshop lights dimmed and Jalen's shadow passed across the doorframe, her hope began to tremble. He had offered her shelter, yes, but the way he had looked at that holographic screen told her one thing. He knew exactly who she was. The days bled together under the pale suns of Damaris 9. In the mechanic's workshop, time had its own rhythm, the hiss of welding torches, the hum of power tools, the faint crackle of static as Lyra worked at the bench. Her hands were always moving, mending what others had broken. Burned-out thrusters, cracked power cells, malfunctioning droids, she fixed them all with quiet precision. Jalen didn't talk much, but he watched her work, and though his face rarely softened, there was something unspoken in his silence. She didn't ask questions, and he didn't offer any. It was safer that way. Lyra had learned how to disappear in plain sight. She kept her hood low, her words few, and her presence unthreatening. The other workers, 2 human men and a wiry synth android, kept their distance, muttering about the alien when they thought she couldn't hear. It didn't matter. She had a bed, she had food, and most importantly, Wren had stopped crying through the night. The baby's cheeks were no longer hollow. Every morning, Lyra would wrap her in a clean cloth, whispering songs in the Zynar tongue as the dawn light streamed through the cracked windows. Sometimes Jalen would pause in the doorway and listen. He never said a word about it, but Lyra could feel his gaze soften. There was a heaviness in him, a kind of guilt that hung around like smoke. She sensed it, but she didn't pry. One evening, While the sky outside burned violet and gold, Lyra sat on the floor beside Wren's cot, repairing a microcircuit with a borrowed soldering pen. Jalen was at his workbench, disassembling a drone engine, his brow furrowed in concentration. The air was heavy with the scent of oil and ozone. "You're good at this," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. Lyra blinked, surprised. "I told you I built things like this before." He set down his wrench. "For the Dominion?" Her fingers froze. "For survival," she replied after a moment. He studied her face carefully, as if trying to measure the truth in her words. "You know, you're lucky the patrols don't come through this way often," he said. "They still take Xynar fugitives when they find them." "I know," she said softly, without looking up. He hesitated before speaking again. "Why'd you run?" The question hit harder than he probably meant it to. For a few seconds she couldn't breathe. Then she looked up at him, eyes glinting in the low light. "Because I chose the wrong side. And when the war ended, everyone I loved was gone." He didn't respond. He just nodded once, almost respectfully, and went back to his work. The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that carried understanding, shared pain from different battles. That night, Lyra woke to the faint hum of electricity. She frowned and stood up quietly, careful not to wake Wren. Through the narrow crack of the door, she saw Jalen still awake, hunched over the workbench. The room was dim, except for the pale glow of a holographic screen. She moved closer, her footsteps silent, and then she saw it. Her heart stopped. On the display was her own face, her official Xynar registry portrait from years ago. The image pulsed red, accompanied by the words "Fugitive, Lyra Vas 10 of Xynar, former Dominion officer. Last seen in Outpost Sector 47. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Her name, her crime, her bounty. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The air around her thickened with dread. Jalen was scrolling through the document, reading something. Classified military data, bounty logs, maybe even her location history. His eyes were sharp, calculating. She took a step back, heart hammering against her ribs. Was this why he had helped her? Was he planning to sell her out, to turn her in for the reward? Her mind raced through possibilities. If he called the patrol, she'd have less than an hour before they arrived. Maybe less. She thought of Wren, her tiny, sleeping form, too fragile to survive another escape. She couldn't let it happen again. But then Jalen did something she didn't expect. He closed the hologram, just turned it off like it didn't matter. He sat there for a moment, staring into the dark, then reached for a flask on the table. His shoulders slumped. The tension in his posture dissolved into something else, weariness, maybe regret. Lyra watched him in silence. If he meant to betray her, he would have already done it. The bounty was high enough to buy freedom off-world, yet he hadn't moved. He hadn't called anyone. When she crept back into her room, her heart still thudded painfully, but her thoughts were tangled in confusion. Why had he looked up her name? And why, after finding out who she was, did he choose to stay silent? The next morning, she found him outside the shop, repairing a speeder bike under the harsh sun. His face was shadowed, his voice neutral. "We'll be getting company soon," he said. "A Dominion patrol came through the neighboring outpost last night. They're scanning workhouses for refugees." Her stomach turned to ice. "They'll find me." "Not if we move fast." He wiped his hands on a rag, glancing at her. "You trust me?" She hesitated. The truth was, she didn't know. But she had no one else. "I don't have a choice." "Good answer." He handed her a small metal key chip. "Pack what you can. There's an old cargo ship in the hangar. She's slow, but she'll get us off this rock. We leave before sundown. We?" she asked, blinking. He met her eyes. "You really think I'm staying here after helping a wanted Xynar?" She wanted to ask him why. Why risk his life for her? But the way he said it, calm, steady, without hesitation, left no room for argument. By midday, the air above the colony buzzed with tension. The Dominion's patrol ships were visible on the horizon, sleek black vessels cutting through the dust. Civilians avoided the streets. Lyra stayed hidden in the workshop, packing what little she owned, a few tools, some rations, and Wren's blanket. Jalen worked quickly, loading supplies into the ship. She watched him from the doorway, struggling to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the one risking everything now. He had known she was wanted. He had proof on his screen. And yet here he was, helping her escape. When he finally came back inside, sweat streaking the dirt on his face, she couldn't hold back any longer. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He paused, setting down a crate. "Because I've seen what the Dominion does to prisoners. And because once someone hid me too," Lyra frowned. "You a soldier?" "Not anymore," he said, his voice low. "I fought in the war, on your side for a while." Her eyes widened. "You fought for the Xynar. I fought for peace," he corrected bitterly. "But peace died faster than the soldiers did." Outside, the hum of approaching engines broke the silence. Patrols. They were closer now, too close. Jalen's jaw tightened. He looked at her, then at Ren sleeping against her shoulder. "It's time." Lyra's throat tightened as she nodded. Together they moved toward the hangar. The wind whipped around them, carrying the sound of sirens. The ship loomed ahead, old but sturdy, its engines flickering to life. Jalen tossed her a blaster from the workbench. "Just in case." She caught it, eyes wide. "I don't want to fight." "Neither do I," he said grimly. "But sometimes the universe doesn't care what we want." The sky darkened as the patrol ships descended over Damaris 9. The roar of engines drowned everything else. Lyra's pulse quickened, every instinct screaming at her to run. Then the comms crackled. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the colony. "Fugitive Lyra Vasten of Xynar, surrender now. You are harboring stolen Dominion technology. Resistance will result in termination." Her blood ran cold. She turned to Jalen, panic rising in her chest. "They've found us!" He didn't flinch. "Not yet." He sprinted to the ship's control panel, hands flying across the keys. "If we launch before they triangulate." A thunderous boom shook the ground as a patrol craft landed at the edge of the outpost. Dust exploded into the air. Lyra's grip tightened on Ren, her mind spinning. "Get in!" Jalen shouted, but before she could move, the comms voice returned, louder, closer this time, vibrating through the metal walls. "Lyra of Xynar, surrender the human, and your child will live." Everything inside her went still. Jalen froze mid-step. Their eyes met. The desert wind screamed through the hangar doors. For the first time since she'd fled her homeworld, Lyra realized what fear truly was, not the fear of dying, but of losing the only person who had ever shown her mercy. The desert sky over Damaris 9 boiled with dust and static. The horizon shimmered with the dark outlines of Dominion patrol ships, their black hulls glinting beneath the twin suns. Alarms wailed from the colony's communication towers, sharp, mechanical cries echoing through the rusted streets. Lyra stood frozen in the hangar doorway, clutching Ren to her chest as Jalen slammed his hand down on the control panel, lowering the ship's loading ramp. He didn't waste time speaking. "Move!" he barked. Lyra's legs obeyed before her mind could. The metallic floor of the ship vibrated beneath her boots as she hurried up the ramp, the baby stirring weakly in her arms. The hum of engines roared around her, too loud, too raw. Every muscle in her body tensed, expecting the whine of incoming fire at any moment. But Jalen wasn't following her. She spun, eyes wide. He was still outside, pulling crates of power cells toward the ship, his movements desperate but precise. "Jalen!" she shouted over the wind. "Leave it. We have enough." He didn't answer. A flash split the sky, a searchlight slicing through the dust storm, locking onto the hangar. The sirens changed pitch, becoming an urgent, high-pitched scream. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. "Jalen, now!" He dropped the last crate and sprinted up the ramp, slamming the hatch closed behind him just as the first energy blast struck the ground outside. The explosion shook the entire hangar, throwing them both to the floor. Ren cried out, the sound piercing and small against the chaos. Jalen stumbled to the cockpit, shouting, "Strap in!" As he hit the ignition, the ship's engines roared to life, sputtering from years of neglect, but catching nonetheless. Lyra slid into the co-pilot's seat, clutching her daughter tightly. Through the viewport, the outpost was ablaze, beams of plasma lighting up the sand like miniature suns. Dominion soldiers poured from dropships, their black armor reflecting the firelight. Lyra saw the insignia on their shoulders, the red serpent of the Xynar Dominion. Her own people's crest, now turned into a symbol of tyranny. "They've found me," she whispered. Jalen didn't look at her. "They found us." The ship lurched upward, engines screaming against gravity. Lyra's stomach twisted as the hangar shrank below them, the desert expanding into a storm of fire and smoke. For a fleeting moment, she thought they might actually make it. Then the comms came alive again. The voice was calm and cold, dripping with authority. "Lyra of Xynar, you are charged with treason, desertion, and theft of classified Dominion technology. Surrender the human male accompanying you, and your child will not be harmed." Lyra's blood ran cold. Her grip tightened around Ren until the baby whimpered. Jalen's jaw clenched. "They want me?" She couldn't answer. Her throat had gone dry. He flicked a series of switches, bringing up the rear camera feed. A Dominion dropship was closing in fast, its cannons glowing hot. "They tracked the ship's signature," he muttered. "Damn it! We can't outrun them in this heap. Then what do we do?" He met her eyes for the first time since the chaos began. "We fight." Before she could protest, he pulled a blaster from beneath the control console and tossed it to her. She caught it instinctively, though her hands trembled. "Jalen, I can't—" "You can," he said firmly. "You're Xynar. You fought before." "You told me. That was different. Not anymore." The Dominion ship fired, and the blast rocked them sideways. Warning lights flared red across the dashboard. The ship's shields were already down to half strength. Lyra gritted her teeth, forcing her shaking hands steady as she adjusted the power couplings to reinforce the hull. Jalen pulled the ship into a sharp dive, sand and debris whipping across the viewport. "Hang on!" The chase ripped through the skies above Damaris 9. The Dominion ship moved with predatory grace, its cannons glowing brighter as it lined up another shot. Jalen veered hard, engines groaning. The cargo ship wasn't built for speed, but he made up for it with instinct, ducking and weaving between rock formations that jutted from the desert floor like ancient bones. Inside, Ren cried. Lyra covered her ears, whispering soothing words between gritted teeth. "Shh, shh, I've got you, little one. I've got you." The radio crackled again, and this time, the voice that spoke wasn't robotic, it was human. Familiar even. "Lyra Vasten, you once led the siege on Orion's Spire, didn't you?" Her breath caught. She knew that voice. Commander Rain, her former superior officer, the man who had ordered the extermination of human colonies during the war. "You fought well," Rain continued, his tone almost nostalgic. "But you turned your back on us. You stole Dominion tech and defected. Now you hide among the very species that slaughtered your people. Tell me, Lyra, how does betrayal feel?" Jalen's knuckles whitened on the controls. "He's trying to rattle you." "He doesn't have to," she whispered. "He already has." Another blast rocked the ship, this one tearing through the left stabilizer. Alarms screamed. Flames licked the edge of the wing. "We're hit!" Jalen shouted. Lyra reached over, rerouting power to the remaining thrusters. "If we can make it to the canyons, we might lose them in the storm front." Jalen nodded, sweat streaking his face. "Hold on tight!" The ship plunged into the canyons, weaving through narrow rock passages as bolts of plasma exploded around them. The hull rattled violently. Sparks showered the cockpit. Lyra's vision blurred from the heat and smoke, but she kept her focus on the energy readouts. Then, through the static, Rain's voice returned, closer, mocking. "You can't run forever, Vasten. The Dominion always collects its debts." Lyra's pulse thundered in her ears. "He's right," she muttered, voice shaking. "They'll keep coming." "Maybe," Jalen said, yanking the controls hard left. "But not today." The ship burst from the canyon mouth, sunlight flaring across the glass. The Dominion craft followed, but as it did, a blast of sand and debris from the storm hit it head-on, disrupting its sensors. Jalen seized the moment. He activated the ship's rear thrusters and fired 2 old plasma charges from the cargo hold. They weren't proper weapons, but they detonated in a cloud of blinding fire. The Dominion ship vanished into the blast. The shockwaves slammed their ship forward. Alarms screaming, but when the light cleared, there was nothing behind them but drifting smoke. They had made it. For a moment, there was silence. Lyra exhaled slowly, her hands shaking, eyes burning. Ren whimpered softly, then fell back asleep against her shoulder. Jalen leaned back in his chair, panting, staring out at the endless desert below. That was too close. Lyra turned to him, voice hoarse. They knew my name. They knew where we were. How? He hesitated. His eyes darted to the navigation console, then away. Maybe they've been tracking Dominion tech, or maybe someone talked. She caught the flicker in his expression, the guilt, fleeting but unmistakable. Jalen, she said quietly, what did you do? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, moving toward the side compartment where the emergency supplies were stored. It doesn't matter, he muttered. We need to fix the stabilizer and get out of range before they regroup. Jalen, she said again, her tone sharper. You knew they were coming. You knew before I did? He froze, his back still to her. The sound of the engines filled the silence. Finally he turned, his face shadowed by exhaustion and guilt. I sent a transmission, he admitted, a week ago. I thought it would help clear my record, prove I wasn't harboring anyone illegal. But then I saw what they were planning to do to you, to the kid, so I jammed the signal before it reached them. Her stomach turned to ice. You told them? I stopped it, he said quickly, stepping closer. I swear, Lyra, I stopped it, but someone must have intercepted it halfway. That's how they found us. She backed away, holding Ren tightly, her heart breaking under the weight of his words. He raised his hands, desperate. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was trying to protect us both. Her voice was low and trembling, but it carried the fury of a storm. You endangered my child. I'm trying to make it right, he said. That's why I stayed. That's why I helped you run. For a long, tense moment, neither of them spoke. The ship's lights flickered, and outside, the storm began to fade. Finally, Lyra looked away, tears streaking her cheeks. If you betray us again, she whispered, I'll kill you before they ever find me. Jalen nodded, his face carved with shame. Fair enough. They stood in silence as the ship drifted higher, the stars beginning to pierce through the haze. In the distance, lightning flashed across the clouds, beautiful and cold. Neither of them spoke again. But both knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The Dominion would regroup. Rain would return, and next time there would be nowhere left to hide. The hangar burned behind them, a bloom of orange fire rising into the twilight sky. Lyra's ears rang from the explosion, and the stench of ozone and scorched metal filled the air. The ship rattled violently as Jalen pushed it higher, the engines straining against the pull of the desert's gravity. Beneath them, the outpost that had been their fragile sanctuary disintegrated into flame and smoke. Ren whimpered in Lyra's arms, frightened by the roar of destruction. Lyra held her tighter, whispering softly in her native tongue, It's all right, little one. I've got you. But she didn't believe her own words. Her body trembled from adrenaline and exhaustion, and her mind raced faster than the ship's engines. Jalen's voice crackled through the noise. We can't stay in orbit. The Dominion will track us from the surface scanners. He jerked the control stick, sending the ship banking sharply east. Through the viewport, streaks of light carved across the desert, patrol drones, dozens of them. Cutting through the smoke like vultures. They're already scanning for us, Lyra said. Her voice steady but low. Then we'll give them something to chase. Jalen flipped a switch, releasing a cluster of heat flares. They burst in midair, scattering brilliant decoys across the sky. The drones swarmed toward the false signals, and for a brief, miraculous moment, the radar cleared. Lyra sank into the co-pilot seat, every muscle aching. She glanced at Jalen, his jaw tight, his hands trembling slightly on the controls. You could have left me, she said quietly. You should have. He didn't look at her. I told you, I've seen what the Dominion does. You didn't deserve that, her eyes hardened. You don't know what I deserve. Yes, I do. His voice cracked slightly, the first time she'd heard it sound almost human. You fought for something once. Maybe it was the wrong side, maybe it wasn't. but you believed in something. That's more than I can say for most people left in this galaxy." She didn't answer. She turned her gaze to the stars instead, the endless stretch of blackness ahead of them. They seemed so close and so impossibly far all at once. Then the comms crackled again. A voice, calm, sharp, familiar, filled the cabin. "Lyra of Zynar, this is Commander Rain. Surrender the human and the child will not suffer. Continue to flee, and you doom them both." Jalen's hands froze. Lyra's heart stopped. The voice that haunted her past had found her once more. Rain's tone was almost tender as it continued. "You were one of my best officers. I trained you, trusted you. Don't throw your life away for a human stray." Lyra's knuckles went white around the blaster in her lap. "He doesn't get to say my name," she muttered. Jalen looked at her. "Who is he?" She didn't answer. Memories flickered like shards of glass in her mind. Rain's face under the flicker of warship lights, his voice echoing through command halls, his orders that left cities burning. She had obeyed him once. She had believed him when he said their war was for freedom. But the freedom he promised had turned into slaughter. Now his voice crawled through her ship like a ghost. "Cut the comms," Jalen said. Lyra hesitated. Then slowly she reached out and muted the channel. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had been. "He'll come for us," she said. "I know." Jalen's tone was quiet, grim. "So we hit first." She looked at him in disbelief. "We can't fight them. Not in this ship. We don't have to fight them. Just him." He turned to face her fully, eyes intense. "I know where he'll go next. There's a relay station in the upper atmosphere. They'll use it to track us once we break orbit. If we take it out, we buy time." She studied him, suspicion flickering in her mind. "How do you know their tactics?" Jalen hesitated. "Because I used to fly for them, before they branded me a traitor too." The revelation hung in the air between them like static. Lyra blinked, trying to process it. "You?" He gave a bitter smile. "Turns out the Dominion doesn't like humans questioning their orders either." For the first time since meeting him, she saw the truth behind his eyes, the guilt, the scars, the weight of a man who had once believed in something and watched it crumble. They were more alike than she wanted to admit. "Set the course," she said finally. He nodded and pulled the ship toward the upper atmosphere. The desert faded beneath them, replaced by a sea of swirling clouds and lightning veins that illuminated the horizon. The relay station came into view minutes later, a skeletal tower floating above the storm, its lights blinking like a watchful eye. Jalen armed the ship's last plasma charge. "This'll drain the engines," he warned. "After this, we're drifting." "Then let's make it count," Lyra said. They descended through the storm, lightning arcing across the hull. The relay grew larger, its metallic surface gleaming with Dominion insignia. The ship shuddered as the targeting systems locked on. 3 seconds to release, Jalen said. 2. Before he could say 1, a blast struck the ship from above. The entire vessel lurched violently, alarms screaming. The rear hull tore open in a burst of flame, and air rushed out in a deafening roar. "They're here!" Lyra shouted. Rain's ship emerged from the storm like a monster from the deep, sleek, black and deadly. Its cannons glowed with pale blue light, the Dominion crest burning on its wings. "Hold on!" Jalen shouted, fighting the controls. "We're not done yet!" He veered hard, bringing the ship alongside the relay. Lyra grabbed the secondary turret controls and aimed blindly through the smoke. She fired, and the plasma bolts streaked across the void, smashing into the relay's base. Sparks erupted, systems failing one by one. Rain's voice broke through the static again, filled with venom now. "You've made your choice, Vasten." Lyra's blood boiled. "No," she whispered. "I'm making mine." She switched the ship's last plasma core to manual overload. Jalen's eyes widened as he realized what she was doing. "Lyra, that'll kill us." "It'll stop them." He hesitated for only a heartbeat before nodding. "Then let's do it together." The Dominion ship fired again, tearing through the cockpit glass. The wind howled, and Lyra shielded Ren with her body. The overload alarm screamed. "On my mark," she yelled. 3, 2, Lyra, Jalen shouted, gripping the controls. 1. She slammed her hand down on the ignition. A wave of blinding white light consumed the relay, the Dominion ship, and the storm around them. The explosion swallowed the sky, and for an instant there was nothing but silence. When the light faded, the world was gone. The ship drifted, half destroyed, through the upper atmosphere. Smoke poured from the hull, and the stars shimmered faintly beyond the cracked glass. Lyra coughed, her lungs burning. Beside her, Jalen slumped over the console, bleeding but breathing. Still, here," he managed to say with a broken smile. Lyra let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob. Ren stirred in her arms, unharmed, eyes fluttering open to the glow of starlight. Jalen leaned back, staring at her and the child. "You're safe now." She looked out through the shattered window. Below them, the fires of Damaris 9 had gone out. The storm was gone too. Only the cold beauty of space remained, infinite and vast. "Safe," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, not safe. Never safe." Jalen smiled faintly. "Then what are we?" She turned her gaze toward the stars, her violet eyes burning with new resolve. "Alive! And that's enough." Outside, the remnants of the explosion drifted into the void, 1,000 shards of light scattering like dust across the galaxy. Somewhere beyond them, the Dominion would recover, would hunt again. But for now, the silence belonged to her. Lyra reached over, placing a hand over Jalen's. "You gave us a chance," she said softly. "No one ever did that before." He smiled weakly, his voice fading. "Just don't waste it." She squeezed his hand, tears glinting in her eyes. "I won't." Ren stirred again, tiny fingers clutching at the edge of her cloak. Lyra smiled through the pain, her heart aching but fierce. She turned her gaze forward, toward the dark horizon where new stars were being born. "They'll come for us again," she whispered. "But this time," her voice hardened, filled with quiet fire, "this time I'll be ready." And as the crippled ship drifted into the night, its engines flickered once more, weak, uncertain, but alive, like a single ember refusing to die.